I went to the theme park and I know all the rides I want to go on. This time, I know exactly where I'm headed. I'm gonna go on the teacups 5 times.
I vomit.
And you're gonna vomit. At least 3 times. Alex, it is 2025, and that means I'm looking for some comfort food myself.
Fair. It has been a hell of a year so far, and boy, comfort would be nice.
That's right, it has been a millennia of a month so far, and I feel like we need some mac and cheese in our life right now. Something that does sound good. Gotta get some of that. But at any rate, many people out there might be familiar with the idea of comfort foods, or maybe even comfort shows or movies. I'm sure that we have a few of our own ones that we like to go back to because we just enjoyed them so much. Generally enjoyable. You keep coming back to them. You know what to expect, but also you like to kind of like dig into them more. It's nice to see the nuance in them. To experience them more fully than maybe you did the first time, recognize stuff that you did. Since it was just December, one of the things I always go back to is like Home Alone. You gotta watch the Home Alone, and it seems like every time I watch that, there's like other things that I didn't catch before, and it's just very fun to like see it again and go, oh, I didn't remember exactly how that worked.
Especially as you get older, you're forgetting some of the things you did know, and it's all brand new secrets to you.
Yeah. Something someone once talked about was that, like, if you look at the McAllister house, the whole house is, like, built in the aesthetic of Christmas, because it's, like, all reds and greens for the wallpapers and, like, the design, so it's very Christmassy, like, just as the house is built. I think that those things are really interesting to look at now and kind of go, oh, yeah, I didn't catch that. On that note, on this episode of Total Pebble Knockdown, we are going to talk about something very similar, which is with games. Comfort games. Those games that were just so enjoyable as a general rule that you keep coming back to them, you know what to expect, and you like going back to the nuance of them to uncover more about them, to experience them again, and there is definitely a factor to them of just feeling very full at the end. The reason why I wanted to talk about this is I've had a backlog of stuff that I was supposed to talk about for 2024 games that came out toward the end of the year. I kept meaning to go back to them. But then a thought hit me, which is, hey, you remember the very beginning of the original Borderlands game? And I was like, oh yeah, I do remember the original. You get off the bus and you go into Firestone, and you know there's this whole thing that you're supposed to do, and I remembered that, and I was kind of like going, oh, I want to go do that. And so fired up the original Borderlands Game of the Year edition. Now with 4K upresing, they have the 4K pack. Started a Hunter, which is not a class I typically take. Always played Soldier, and then I tried Siren. Loaded up Mordecai, and got off the bus. Marcus left me off the bus. I went to Firestone, and then it's like, well, I'm here now. I might as well play through the whole game. and before I even finished the game, I was kind of like going, hey, you remember the beginning of Borderlands 2 where you're in this? It's like, so I've downloaded Borderlands 2 again. And it's like, I never played 0. I should probably play 0. I wonder what the assassin is like when you're playing through. So, you know.
Here we are, 2025, playing Borderlands 2 all the way through.
Yeah, isn't that fun? That game has been around for a while now. We're looking at Borderlands 4 coming out this year.
Oh boy, I didn't realize 3 did good enough to make them want to do a 4th.
Oh, well, the thing about 3 is, I played a lot of 3. The thing about 3 is, the game was really good. The story was not. The story was not, and the villains were not. The Calypso twins were not compelling as villains, especially compared to Handsome Jack. So, it didn't do well on that end. But, yeah, Borderlands 4 is definitely justified. Hopefully they'll have a more compelling story and characters, but at any rate,
I hope it's all written by AI.
have it written by Claptrap. That would be great. And the sad thing is that as soon as I started thinking about Borderlands 2, inevitably I started thinking about pre-sequel, and it's like, hey, remember when you were on the moon in the pre-sequel? And an underrated game, by the way. Pre-sequel was great. I loved pre-sequel.
What I'm hearing is you have commitment issues of some kind.
I have commitment issues, and Borderlands series is a good example. But this does talk a lot about the idea of a comfort game. Those ones that you played once upon a time. They were very enriching. They were enjoyable on a kind of like deep level where it gave you exactly what you wanted out of that game. And so you come back to them. And looter shooters, specifically Borderlands in this case, are sort of that, although I've played much worse versions of it. But Borderlands, I think, is just the example that I would give for the looter shooter genre in this case, because I really loved, like, you go back to it and you're kind of like going, man, the graphic style that they did for this was so interesting and so innovative, and the way they did these level design, it's just, you appreciate it more now when you go back to it.
It's a little bit of both, like, both the gameplay and also the story, the storytelling and the characters and the places.
Yeah, you have the...
It's kind of like, yes, I'm returning home.
Yeah, you have the dopamine levels of doing the looting part, but you're also like, oh, this was a really great landscape and design and aesthetic that they put into this that really did, like, you remember why it felt really fresh and interesting the first time through, and when you up-res it and you change those things around, it just feels new and fresh again. It is very much like you had that bowl of macaroni and cheese, and it used to be like the Kraft macaroni and cheese, and you remember that fondly. Now, when somebody makes you a nice macaroni with cheese with like real cheese and they melt it down into the thing, and they put the herbs and stuff in there, it still feels familiar, like your old Kraft mac and cheese, but it seems enhanced. It's updated to a level that you can appreciate now.
Added MSG.
You add a bunch of MSG, and you're in for a time.
I'd like to point out, just for anyone listening, that these are subjective, not objective opinions on, like, our comfort games as well. I don't expect everyone to say looter shooters, or Borderlands specifically, are comfort games for them. Like, for instance, I wouldn't, but I would say something like World of Warcraft, to me, is a comfort game.
You keep going back to that.
I do. I've put in well over 6,000 hours into World of Warcraft over the years.
I keep meaning to ask, do you start new characters, or are you still working on the same?
I generally, what I've done with each expansion is kind of started a new character, or tried a new class I hadn't yet. Because I don't play it and then pick a single character or a single class, and I'm like, yes, this is what I play. Which some people do. Good on them to have that level of commitment. You only play shamans? Cool. I guess that's fine. I'll bebop around. I'll make a new character for an expansion, like if it's a new class that dropped, or if it's something I want to try, because they're tweaking stuff with the classes. I like trying pretty much all the classes. There's only like 2 of them I don't really play ever, maybe 3. And it's mostly just the play style I don't really vibe with for them. But yeah, I'll play around with that. But for me, saying that Warcraft is a comfort game for me, because I will constantly go, I don't really know what I want to play. And I'll sit there and I'll look through, like, I've got hundreds of games in my Steam library. And I'll go, none of these seem appealing to me right now. I need something that's just comforting and that I can just go and play without having put a lot of thought into, and always find something enjoyable to do.
The thing about it is, similar to what I was talking about with Borderlands too, is that you have different classes and different ways that you can play the game. So if you want to mix it up, you're still playing the game that you understand, that you know, but there's lots of other things that you can go back to. So it can still feel a little bit fresh, but it's also something very familiar.
I might be like, I want to go play WoW, and then I get in WoW and go, what do I want to do? And I'm like, well, I just kind of want to fish for 3 hours. I can do that. I can 100%. I have done that. I've spent a day just kind of like monitor on one side, listening to something or watching something, and then fishing on the other side in World of Warcraft.
The fishing in World of Warcraft, is it more satisfying than the angler?
Doesn't take much, and considering it's a button to cast
Yes.
your reel,
Mm-hmm.
and then when the bobber bobs, you click in the bobber.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's more satisfying.
Sorry, I don't need to rag on the angler, but I also kind of mean to rag on the angler.
Did you play that? Did you try it?
I did, and I fell asleep real fast playing that.
Listen, Call the Hunter.
Call the Wild the Hunter.
Call the Wild, amazing hunting game.
Great hunting game. Yes.
The Angler,
boring.
Terrible fishing game.
As I said this the last time, and I will say it before, because I think I said I was going to bury the Angler on, not this Save Bury Reboot, but on last year's, and I said it really needed to be an expansion to the Hunter. The fishing mechanics really could have easily just been a side, like, DLC for the game. In similar fashion to, like, in World of Warcraft, you can fish, but there's a whole other game there. There's, like, the rest of the game you can play.
There is so much to do in the game that sometimes you can get lost in what you should be doing, which is a different set of problems that people have with the game occasionally. But
right. But
I digress.
You always feel. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I imagine that when you go into World of Warcraft, though, it feels fulfilling to you in a meaningful way that you wouldn't necessarily get from stepping into a game that you're not familiar with.
I don't have to learn anything new. I just kind of go back into it and be like, yes, I'm playing my warrior today. It's like, I remember all my rotation. I remember what these abilities do. Where did I leave off? Oh, I'm here. What do I want to do? What are my quests that I have right now? Okay, do I want to go do something else random or just work on quests? It's like, I could ignore my quest log and be like, I'm going to go explore this area for a bit. Just randomly. It's like, I haven't been to Blades Edge Mountains in a year. When's the last time I went to Mechagon? And it's always some sort of progress you're making. Either it's looting or killing or skinning or exploring or whatever, so.
Right. There's a sense of, like, getting behind the driver's seat of your car. Where it's like that you know where the pedals are, you know that the seat's in the place that you want it to be. You know what everything does. Now you're gonna go and you're gonna take a drive. And you don't necessarily know if the drive's gonna be exactly the same, but it's probably gonna be similar. And you know how the controls work in this. There's been quite a few games that I have pieced out of simply because the control scheme did not make sense to me.
Yeah, there's quite a few of those for me too.
The other genre that I will usually cite for this is like the life sim, which again I've played some versions. I think Stardew Valley is probably the most famous one that I do have a certain love for, although Coral Island I've probably put more hours into of late. But there is something, again, very interesting about that genre, because there is always a progress that goes into it. It's fun to, like, see your farm at the beginning of the game and say, wow, there's a lot of work to do, but you feel like, well, I'm going to go through that work, and I'm going to make something cool out of it, and I know the people that live here. I know the town that I'm in. I'm in Pelican Town. I know what's going on. And, it's like you're revisiting those folks. You're revisiting that town. You're revisiting those storylines. You're going to these places, the deserts, the islands, and stuff like that you remember fondly from the past. And so there's definitely something very cozy about it, because that's really what I guess I'm talking about is the cozy games. But games like Coral Island, Stardew Valley, have a real way of kind of lending themselves to things you find comforting. I could own my own house and farm? That really would be comforting.
Got one of those things down.
Yeah, you got one of them. Yeah, I mean, I have 1.5. I guess my garden's kind of like a farm, I guess. So there's that. but then also you have like relationships and friends and stuff, and
For me, though, I don't consider cozy games to be comfort games. They're meant to be like cozy, and I get that. And they're, coziness is synonymous with comfort a lot of times, and I get that too. But like in a gaming context, I wouldn't necessarily say because they're not just comfort to me. And I for me, I have a hard time playing those games and enjoying them nearly as much. But I feel like cozy games like that, because there are a lot of systems that are more intricate and usually a story that goes into it, and it may not be like a novella award-winning story or anything like that. I don't know. I don't play them. But there is story and relationships and character building and growth and stuff, and it can definitely feel rewarding. But to me, that would almost fall into something we're going to talk about later, which would be like enrichment games.
The reason why, like, the cozy game or a life sim, when you find one that's a good example, like, because there's a lot of, like, meh examples that I've played.
Well, I mean, at that point, anything when you have a good example and something that you return to constantly, just comfort and enjoy. Like Animal Crossing for a lot of people would be a comfort game because they just, oh yeah, I need to go and tend to my farm, and same thing. It's one of those cozy games where it's just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna play this and I'll jam out for that 6 hours on it and didn't know the time passed.
You also kind of like know the story behind them. This is kind of where I find it. Like Stardew Valley, I know the story behind is, Eric Barone, Concerned Ape, like made this himself. Like it was like a one man, and it was literally because I really liked Harvest Moon. No one's making Harvest Moon games. I want to make that now, and I'll just do it. And it's just kind of wonderful, like that there was. It's sort of like those games where you can feel that there was actually like a lot of care and consideration and heart behind it, where it starts to exude through those games and you can relate to it. And when you can relate to it, it means more. Borderlands also, if you look at the original trailers that they did, looked nothing like the final product. It looked very much like a standard shooter game. And they went back to the drawing board later and they were like, oh, this looks generic. Let's do something different. Let's do something a little bit weirder and more obscure, and let's change like the style and the tone of it and everything. And they went back to the drawing board, went outside of their comfort area, which would have been to make a very standard, like maybe not even a looter shooter, but just a shooting game. And they came back with Borderlands, which ended up being a big hit series past that. Those are really interesting storylines for those games that also lend themselves to it. The other one, though, I guess I wanted to cite is one that is so unusual to see now, and maybe that's the reason why I keep wanting to return to it, and I just can't, which is Escape Velocity. A game that you probably didn't even play and probably didn't even have, because it was originally just on Mac, and it wasn't until like the third installment that they made a Windows version. Ambrosia Software did. But now when I see games where it looks like they're taking inspiration from it, it gets me more interested, because it's like that's probably the closest I'm going to come to now, considering I played these like back in the late 90s, that I'm going to get to. But that was also one of those great things where it's like, I know what I'm going to expect. I'm going to start out with my little shuttle. And my little shuttle is on a planet, and it's like a top-down, galaxy. And I start in this one system. I got my little shuttle, and I'm a plucky pilot. I just got my pilot's license. And now I have to figure out, like, how do I make money? And how do I, like, get better parts and get better ships and learn about this world and go through the storylines for people and unlock new stuff in this galaxy without getting, continually destroyed by pirates and militias and stuff like that, and angry traders. There's something very enjoyable and the kind of thing that you like to return to about the idea of those very simple routes that are going to expand into something that's bigger. I think that's the reason why when they did what is an open source project, but it's Endless Sky, and Endless Sky takes a lot of inspiration from basically trying to do Escape Velocity, but as like an open source game that you can get now. And so it was fun to be able to go back and play something like that. Although I always felt like that was one that you'd love to see in like 3D, and I think there might be some around that I might be able to play that might scratch that itch. But there is something very endearing about the idea of starting out very small, as a little small bean, and then kind of going off in whatever direction that you have, because the skies are the limit, and figuring out where you're gonna go. I think that's kind of the reason why, like, Elder Scrolls is such a big thing for people.
The reason is specifically, like, a game like Elite Dangerous or No Man's Sky is something I enjoy, too. As much as I would like to say Elite Dangerous is, like, a comfort game for me, because I've got, like, 800 plus hours in it, I don't always sit and think, I could just kind of boot this game up and go do things that. It's like I have to be in a specific mood for that. It's like World of Warcraft, I don't have to be in any specific mood. I can just be like, I'm kind of bored, I want to do something, but I don't know what I want to do. Boot up WoW. I'll find something to do.
You can always kind of like tell what a comfort game is, because you'll be sitting like just stationary for a minute and you'll go, you know what I really loved playing? You know what I really enjoyed? What I'd really like to experience again? This thing. Specifically this thing. And there are plenty of games where it's like I felt very comforted at the time, but it's also the one I can't return to for the same reason. And it's like Spiritfarer is a great example of that. It's the reason why I had cited it last year as like the game that everyone should play once, but emphasis on the once, because when you get to the end of that storyline, it feels so final, like you've really come to the conclusion of something, that I don't know if I can go back to it, because it wouldn't feel as comforting, because it feels like a natural finality to it, in a way that other games like a Borderlands or Stardew Valley don't, where they feels like they kind of go on forever, whether you're there or not. You know, it's that kind of an experience. Would you say, like a Diablo, would a Diablo for you be a comfort game? Would it fall into that realm? Because I don't know myself. Like, I'd say 2.
I feel like for me, that would fall into more of at that point, it would fall more into like a junk food game for me. You can only really get the story out of it once. It's like, you might notice like, oh, the Wanderer the whole time in Diablo 2, like, this mysterious guy, definitely, yeah, he was the guy who had the soulstone stuck in his forehead. Yeah, totally makes sense. But like, you're not going to get a lot of nuance out of it.
Sometimes you notice things about the story that you didn't on first.
A little bit, but like, I think especially the way Diablo has come from 2, 3, and 4, it's definitely more of a go in, grind, get loot, and kind of it's an always moving upward game at that point, which is it's more junk food towards me.
I would say that I didn't feel that with like Diablo 3 or 4, but 2 was definitely one. 2 was definitely one. It was probably my favorite installment of that whole series.
But going back to play it now, like Diablo 2, Reforged, Remastered, whatever.
Yeah, Resurrected. I have not played it.
It doesn't feel the same.
Yeah.
Oh, I have it.
Sometimes you can't go home again. They gave you the mac and cheese, but they decided to like make it like a bespoke hot cuisine, and it doesn't really...
It's like all the parts were there, and they just looked better, but they didn't taste any different.
They made the cheese out of the macaroni, and the macaroni out of the cheese.
Sure.
And it's like wait...
What I wanted out of like a Diablo 2 remaster was like Diablo 3, but Diablo 2. And what I got was a Diablo 2, but a little prettier.
Catwatch 2025.
Gotta have at least one for 2025.
One of my favorite games of all time, as I've talked about, I think I've actually said it's my favorite, is Fallout New Vegas. Fallout New Vegas, out of all of the Fallout games, is probably the one that I use as a comfort game anyway, because it's one of those things where there's something that just kind of fills my whole being with joy being able to walk outside of Doc Mitchell's house into Good Springs. And there's that moment that you just kind of go, oh, it feels like I'm home. Like this feels like I've been away too long and I need to be back here, which is always a weird thing to say about a post-apocalyptic landscape, but
Yeah, sometimes the post-apocalypse can be
comforting, surprisingly. Yeah, if you don't actually have to live in it. I think that might actually be something, one of the reasons why we have a certain affinity towards it. It's like, well, good thing I'm not there. Good thing I don't actually have to live that. It feels nice, like, oh, I can survive as a character in this world. That's something. But good thing I don't have to actually run across a Deathclaw. But what I found is, every time I went through New Vegas, it was fun to, figure out, a different way to address the game, and a different skill set to take on. So, instead of long-range combat, maybe I am more sturdy, and maybe I can do more melee weaponry at some point, or I do heavy weaponry, or pistols, or something like that. But also, it lends itself really well, more than I think most of the Fallout games, to, you got the road right outside of town, and that road stretches in a couple directions, but there's also, these rolling hills that invite you to go across the road and out into the territory, and they give you these different paths that are of varying difficulties, like you're on a hike, and they say, here's the difficult path, here's the easy path, and you've climbed this mountain before, but now you're oh, I have options still. Which way am I going? And I know, inherently, having played New Vegas as many times as I have, that it's well, I know that if I go to the right, and I go through Prim, that's the correct way to go down and up into New Vegas, and go through the storylines that lead you there, through Boulder City. But you could also go left, and I can run into a quarry full of Deathclaws, and try to get through all of that, and, try to cut across there. Or you can go right through the mountains and try to take your luck with the rad scorpions and, all of that, and pass by the Brotherhood of Steel bunker, and I can try to make a beeline there and see if it's faster that way. Hopefully you make it. But the landscape is both familiar enough to me that I kind of know the terrain, but also gives you these wonderful moments where you're I don't think I remember that. I don't think I encountered this the last time I came through. You get those little things that are just new installments, sort of like when you're watching that movie, and you go, oh, right, I didn't remember this before.
Yeah, no, I can get that, though. Having something you're very familiar with, you gotta, well, I can go this way or that way. It's kind of similar with Skyrim to a point. I don't go back. I have gone back to Skyrim multiple times, but it's less a familiarity with the story as more of a, I want to murder things with magic and swords.
I find it very fun when you have those games where you can go to them and you can be very, very aggressive or incredibly passive at the same time. That is more of an Obsidian philosophy than maybe a Bethesda philosophy, but they did do it in Skyrim, so
Well, good news for everybody. We have Avowed coming out next month. It's Obsidian and looks like a Skyrim spiritual successor.
I've been happy with Obsidian in the past. This looks like a very interesting, and this, I think I mentioned it before, but it's in the Pillars of Eternity universe, so it's actually the third installment. They've also announced that they're going to be doing Outer Worlds 2 with a lot of the improvements people were asking for the first one. Going to be fun to see that. So, good things on the horizon, hopefully. There are a handful of games, and it's not even necessarily the greatest games that I ever played as a general rule, but they are definitely a subset inside of it, where they have enough replayability where you can go back and you can experience them with fresh eyes, but they're also familiar enough that you can step into them and kind of know what's going on. it has to kind of engender a certain feeling to you that I've played a lot of good games where they just don't do that. Like, they're good games, they might be interesting games, they might be ones I play for a long period of time, but they don't do that specifically. I don't get that experience out of it, where, like, 2-3 years down the line, I sit there and kind of go, you know what game was great that I really wish I was playing right now? This one. And so there is a handful of games that will be that. I'll see it on my library as I'm scrolling down, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, that. Can I get that again in my system? I've been missing that. I've been starving, and I need this now for this specific kind of experience that they offer. Sometimes it is like an open world game. That can happen a lot of times. I picked up Bully recently because I was like, I remember playing this a couple times, and each time it's really fun. I think I may need to play this again. Sometimes it is an RPG. Sometimes it is a platformer. Those are also really good examples of it. I really can't say that it's just a genre that I find acceptable, because there's going to be so many examples inside of it that I try thinking that it's going to do that, and they fall short of what you're hoping they're going to do. My favorite genres are like the immersive sims and like the Metroidvanias, for similar reasons, because they're very focused on exploration and experimentation and stuff like that. But I've played a lot of examples of those that were not nearly as satisfying as the best examples in the genre that I enjoyed. I know you recently picked up Soul Reaver 1 and 2, the remastered. Would you say that that's kind of like remasters of those games? Does that give you the same satisfaction as...
I don't think so, and there are two reasons for that. One is, I think, again, this would probably go into the later section we're going to talk about for, like, story-rich games, where you get a lot from the story. But I also feel like there's a subset of nostalgia-based. There's just a heavy nostalgia for it. So it can fit the comfort for that, but it's not quite the same.
It's trickier with story-rich games, I think, to go back to them. I enjoyed going back to KOTOR and KOTOR 2. They do have very rich stories. They also have very fun mechanics and levels design and everything like that. So you kind of experience it on that level. But I don't know if I'd necessarily label them as like a comfort game if I was putting them into... They're the kind of thing that's fun to revisit once in a while. Just to see, like, hey, I think...
Sightseeing games.
Sightseeing games. Those were actually the ones where I went back specifically to mod them to see, like, the cut content and other stuff that I would not have had available to me before. And I was like, it would be interesting to see the other things that this game can do that I had not seen before. And a lot of comfort games, you don't need that. You can experience them for what they were and appreciate what they were at that time. Not that KOTOR isn't a great game. I still consider it one of my favorites, but it doesn't necessarily do that. I don't have a sudden yearning to go and re-experience the Endar Spire at the beginning of that game. In the same way that it's like being presented with your farm in Stardew Valley gets you all giddy like, ooh, the possibilities, or getting off the bus in Borderlands kind of goes, oh, I know I'm gonna have to deal with some bandits and take Firestone back over, and like, it doesn't do that, which I think is just a big hallmark of what we're talking about here, is that excitement of knowing that from the very get-go, when you start out in that game, it's like, ooh, I know where I'm going now. I know what I want to do. I'm going to hit all the things. I went to the theme park, and I know all the rides I want to go on. This time, I know exactly where I'm headed. I'm going to go on the teacups 5 times. And you just know you're gonna vomit at least 3 times. In the coming weeks, we're gonna talk about different kinds of games that do very different things. But I think it's interesting that on the last episode we were talking about the reason why we stopped playing games for a wide variety of reasons. And on this one, and the ones past this, we're really going to be talking about the reasons why you start playing games. Like, the reasons why you begin and continue to play games long term. I said one of the best, like, the best case scenario for why you stop playing games is because you've done everything in the game. We're kind of talking about games where you've done everything in the game, but you still want to play the game. You still want to go back into the game because you're wondering, did I do everything? Is there something else?
What else can I do?
What else can I do?
Maybe I just want to do it all over again.
I want to do it all over again. We don't just watch movies once. We don't necessarily read a book once. We go back, we do it again.
Speaking of, I was going to ask Nathan, do you have a either comfort TV show or comfort book, perhaps?
Ooh, comfort book, not really. I was never a heavy reader, so I have to admit that. I'm sorry. Have some books I liked, but it was never a big thing for me. I probably have comfort movies. I was talking about, like, Home Alone is definitely around Christmas time. Is definitely one that I like to do. Muppet Christmas Carol, Scrooged. A lot of ones around that particular. Ghostbusters is definitely during, like, Halloween, something I like to look at. Television shows. I'm trying to think about the television shows that I've actually watched multiple times. I'm trying to think. You know what? Burn Notice, I have actually gone through a couple times. Because I watched it when it came out, and then I watched it again more recently. The one that I keep wanting to go back and watch again, though, because I liked it so much the first time, Justified. I keep thinking that at some point I want to watch all of Justified again. One more time through.
For me, TV shows, I would say Gravity Falls. There's a couple anime like FLCL and Cowboy Bebop that I would say I can just watch and be enjoyable, especially since FLCL is only 3 hours long. Farscape, which I'm still in the process of rewatching with Ray for the first time. We're on the last season, so that's great. As for comfort books, I do have 5. It's A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's my favorite 5-part trilogy.
Yeah. Yeah. Pentrilogy, is that what they would refer to it?
No, it is just called a 5-part trilogy, which is on point. I can go back and read that book whenever. These days I have less energy to like sit down and read because I want to be doing other things. But like, if I want to sit down and read, and I'm not sure what I want to do, it's like, I haven't read The Hitchhiker's Guide in a while. I could definitely read that all over.
Once upon a time, way back, I would usually like put on Stargate marathons, and I'd watch Stargate while I was like on the computer or doing stuff, and that was always fun, because it's like, oh, they're going through the Stargates and they're doing fun things. And,
well, then you still get Ben Broder
and Claudia Black in the last season.
Claudia Black,
yeah, the last couple seasons they took over the thing. That was just one of those shows. It's like, oh, this is always going to be entertaining. I gotta see what's going on. Once upon a time, way back when, I would record episodes of like Perfect Strangers from like the TGIF comedy block, because it's like, well, I gotta watch Balky. There's media that you just remember very fondly, and a lot of it does stem from, I guess, your childhood or from a simpler time. But I think it's also just those things that were there when you needed them, and gave you something that you were looking for. I think, like, when I originally played a lot of these games, it was giving me something that I just did not have previously. A lot of these are the first examples of the genres or the things that I experienced. And that's the reason why they're fun to go back to now. You go back to the well, because sometimes you just need to get hydrated. So that's why you've gone back. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think it's kind of fun to look at it a little bit more analytically. But the thing about it is that so many of those comfort games, I actually don't want to look at analytically. I don't
like looking at games analytically in general, so.
Yeah, I mean, I do with usually newer games, because I want to kind of like figure out what they're doing. But a lot of these other ones, I actually find that looking at it analytically kind of takes away the magic of them.
Same reason I don't like to analyze books.
Yeah, it's like, did you enjoy the book? If you enjoyed the book, then you're in great shape. At some point, I wanted to do an episode in the future about, like, series we liked, but the best installment of those series that we enjoyed, which I think would be very interesting. And, there are some that would be hard for me, because, like I said, like, Borderlands, going back to the original, is something, but it's kind of hard to say that it was the best of its genre, but it definitely is a comfort game in that regard. If I were to really look at it and ask myself some real analytical, objective questions, then no, it's probably not, it's definitely not the best in the series. But there is something about it that is so charming that I have to go back to it. From a technical perspective, is New Vegas the best of the Fallout game? Well, actually, it might be. Come to think of it. But there's a case you could make that some of them are not necessarily the best, but they do something very unique in how they interact with the players and the experience that you get as a player from playing them. And I guess what I kind of wanted to leave everybody with is I'm curious about the games that you get that sensation from, and the reason why you had them. Or, I guess, not to get too analytical, why at the time you found them so enjoyable and what you like getting out of them now.
I think just boiling it down to, let us know your comfort games in the comments down below.
Yeah. That's a much easier way to put it. So, if folks wanted to get some comfort food that's Total Pebble Knockdown related, Alex, where could they go on the internet?
If you want some comfort in the form of Total Pebble Knockdown, you can go to TotalPebbleKnockdown.com.
Exactly. And while you're there, you can even click on our Patreon banner. We'll have full episodes of the show up early for our patrons, as well as additional stuff that does not usually make it into the show, bonus content, and the like. Of course, you can find us on all podcast apps known to mankind. Rate and review and subscribe while you're there. And we're kind of on social media, but to be honest with you, you're probably better to check out our Discord if you would like to stay in touch.
Which there's a link to the Discord on the website, and potentially in somewhere down here too.
Yeah, there's a link to the Discord down below, so you feel free to check us out. It is a public Discord. We have some fun conversations over there that are much more directed towards actual gaming rather than the general wasteland of social media in other places. So
I think it's about to become an apocalypse of social media. So.
Yeah, the apocalypse, we could call it. Yeah. But in the meantime, though, yeah, anything that is more gaming related as pertinent to this channel, probably better to go over to our Discord channel at Total Pebble Knockdown. So, with that being said, though, thank you for joining us on this episode. On the next one, I believe we are going to be talking about a slightly different phenomenon of junk food games, and what those are, and what they are for us.
More sugar.
Yeah, I just want empty calories, damn it. No, you don't need anything that fills me up.
I saw a good meme. It was an alligator eating chocolate, and it said, "They're not empty calories, that they give you joy, Barbara."
That's right, alligator. You live your best life. Come on. Anyway, and right after he ate the candy bar, he ate Barbara.
Probably.
Yeah. And you know what? That was also empty calories. But he did enjoy it. Anyway, thank you for joining us on this episode, Alligator and Chocolate regardless. And you come back and see us on the next one. Goodbye for now.
Hey.